Il vasto ed ampio concetto di comunicazione viene declinato in diversi linguaggi, ad esempio quando ci si addentra nel settore vinicolo si attraversa una selva ricca di pulpiti dai quali il messaggio del vino viene emanato. Punto fisso di questo flusso di informazioni e orientamento per i wine lovers e gli addetti di settore sono le guide del vino con i loro punteggi, le loro classifiche e le loro suggestioni. Dall'altra parte c'è invece un racconto del vino lontano dal sistema scolastico di voti e giudizi, romantico e letterario che oltre al calice e alla scheda tecnica elucubra e traduce in romanzo il territorio e la storia delle persone. Nel 2024 cosa conta di più, le guide o i racconti del vino? Ed entrambi manterranno la loro posizione di fronte all'invasione dei social?
I think you need stories and scores. I think stories are what connect us. When sometimes the raspberry, cherry, and chocolate doesn't necessarily communicate. Sometimes people don't quite understand that when they say, well, I know what I like, but I don't know how to choose certain flavors in a wine. So sometimes reading the notes doesn't work for everyone, but a score gives them an overall idea of quality. But to really connect to the wine, sometimes people need the story to understand the winemaker or the heritage of the family, or the newness of a new property. And I think that's what helps people. It's what takes them over the line in terms of what they decide to purchase, whether it's wine A or wine B. Sure, I think that the more and more definition of terroirs is becoming very interesting to people. People want to understand, for example, in Barolo or even with Brunello, with single crus, people are very excited to try to understand and parcelate those different definitions. People are also very interested in blended wines, so easy drinking, very gluggable, juicy styles of wine, and people are very interested in. They don't have to be necessarily age-worthy, like the most regal, distinguished wines of Italy, but they can be something that's just fun and juicy to drink. I think that both of those are things that both collectors and the casual drinkers are very excited about, and Italy offers both. I think events are wonderful for consumers. They want access because anyone can read about a wine, but they may not necessarily know how to find them. Some wines are made in such small quantities and such small production. They're very allocated. So it's hard for consumers to find them. To have access to an event where they can taste the wines and maybe even go through guided tastings of the wine so they can not just taste it but learn more about it and why it's so special is really unique. And people want to go behind the curtain today. They want access. They want to feel like they're sitting in the kitchen with the chef, and that is definitely an important and more interesting aspect that many wine publications are offering.
It's a good question because, scores are out there. It's like Pandora's box. You can't put them back in the box. They're out there. They're everywhere. But there are so many scores available now and so many people giving scores and so many levels of expertise behind those scores and a lot of agendas behind those scores. And so the consumer doesn't necessarily understand what's behind that score. They only know that, they bought, a 95-point wine, and when they got it home and opened it, it was more like an 85-point experience, and they're disappointed. And so they become mistrusting of scores. And so what they do want is the truth behind the wine. What's the story behind the wine? Tell me a little bit about the person that made it or where it comes from. Talk to me about why this person is better than that person. And that's why I think it's very important to break away from that sea of scores and start to communicate to people, to empower consumers a little bit more with those wineries that are honestly, a little bit of a cut above the rest. Maybe they're a new discovery, or maybe they're a winery that have been flying under the radar. Maybe they're over-delivering on value, or maybe they've always been a great benchmark name, but people need reminding of that famous winery. And that's what we're there to do. I think we can't get rid of scores. We still have to give the scores, but we have to give more as well in order to provide consumers with something genuine when they're looking to make their buying decisions. When I started up the Wine Independent, I was very adamant that I didn't want to do anything, have anything to do with the walkabout tasting business model. Largely because I feel that it's a sort of business model that's unsustainable unless you start compromising your ethics. And I'm not saying that all wine publications who offer these big, large-scale tastings are compromised, but what I am saying is that a lot of them accept or request large sums of money in order to put wines on the table at these events. And most of the money, most of the profitability that they're making from these events is actually coming from the wineries and not from the consumers. That obviously puts them in a compromising situation, because when you're accepting a large sum of money from a producer, regardless of whether you're directly reviewing or critiquing that producer's wines there on the spot, you are also going to be offering wine criticism about that producer at some point in time. And it makes it very difficult, to put out a bad review or a bad score about that person, because you're indebted to them for what, the money that you need for the event. So I do think that it can be a very difficult situation running events like this and using it as, a substantial part of your business model in order to run a wine publication. I think that the most important thing for wine media is to remember that as an unbiased wine critic or somebody who's communicating about wine, you're working for the consumer and not for the winery. I think sometimes winemakers and wineries believe that you're there to do marketing for them. You're not. If it just so happens that you say something wonderful about them and lots of their wines sell, that's really nice. But our focus first and foremost is on servicing the consumer and understanding what the consumer wants and needs. We have a sea of wines available, particularly in the market that I live in the USA, over 400,000 wine labels at any one time there. And our job is really to help people to navigate that sea. Italian wines are incredibly popular in America, and that's wonderful. But there's a lot of them available. And it's really focusing on the wines that are over-delivering, overachieving, creating something, unique, but that is also great, and that helps to draw the consumer into a special type of experience that, generates an experience of Italy, of where it comes from. And I do feel that that's very important. I mean, everybody seems to want to chase these consumer trends. Oh, we see, the global consumers drinking more white wines, let's make some more white wine. But I think, at the end of the day, you need to stay true to who you are and what you have to offer the consumer that's unique. And when I'm looking to review wines, that's what I'm looking for, something that stands out above all the rest, so that I can tell a little story and give that little story to the consumer as part of the experience they're going to have when they open the bottle and they enjoy the wine.
Dunque abbiamo capito che è importante la qualità del vino, così come la comunicazione di esso stesso. In tal senso abbiamo voluto chiedere a Laura Catena, alla guida di bodega Catena Zapata, una delle cantine più importanti del mondo, la cantina familiare più storica dell'Argentina, risalente al 1902 e da poco nominata anche World Best Vineyards, la cantina più bella del mondo. Dunque, in un mondo che cambia e guarda soprattutto ai giovani, voi su cosa puntate per la vostra comunicazione aziendale?
Per me la cosa più importante è dire la cosa vera, la cosa autentica che si è fatto nella nostra famiglia, nel nostro paese. Allora comincio con questa idea pioniera che ha avuto mio padre di fare un Malbec per collezionare, per un vino che si possa collezionare, invecchiare. E questo Malbec è diventato famoso, ma quando ha cominciato mio padre non si conosceva il Malbec. Allora io ho parlato oggi a Wine to Wine su come si hanno queste idee, come si fanno queste rivoluzioni. Ti svegli un giorno e hai un'idea? No. devi pensare, devi leggere, devi parlare con le persone in tuo paese, in altri paesi, devi studiare altre cose, la storia, l'arte, io ho studiato la biologia, la medicina e dopo quando trovi una cosa diversa, e deve essere diversa, mio padre sempre mi dice Laura, non provare di essere il migliore, provare di fare qualcosa nuova, diversa e la nostra idea è stato il Malbec, ma doveva essere di buona qualità, allora mio padre ha avuto questa idea di piantare più alto e più alto si fanno i vini più delicati, più eleganti, con più di struttura e oggi con il cambio climatico questa è una zona dove non fa più caldo perché è una zona di montagna, allora anche è stato fortunato lui. Allora l'idea è di pensare, di fare le cose diverse dagli altri, ma devono essere autentiche e di dirle con il cuore. E questo che ho mostrato nella presentazione, quando io faccio un post su Instagram, quando abbiamo avuto 100 punti per un vino, quando abbiamo avuto questo World's Best Vineyard, la gente vuole che ti vada bene e sono contenti e fanno i likes. Il vino deve essere prima di tutto buono, quello è una condizione, ma una volta che il vino è buono, esatto, diventa una forma di raccontare una storia, è come un libro, è una parte della storia, sì.